Hi there. You are listening to the Perio Patient Podcast, a podcast for my incredible periodontal patients and anyone else who cares to listen. My name is Dr. Ben Young, and I am practicing in the beautiful city of San Antonio, Texas. Today, I just wanted to mention that there is a problem with dental insurance for those who have multiple policies. Now, how we all get policies is understandable. They come through oftentimes our spouse's employer and then our employer, and all of a sudden we've got more. I've heard of one person who had 4 dental insurance policies. The problem is that the insurance companies will not double pay for procedures. So what they do is they assign you a primary provider and a secondary. So if you have an employer, your insurance probably will be the primary. And then if there's anything left over, they can apply it to your husband or wife's policy, but they all have their own stipulations. Consequently, it isn't what people think that because they have 2 policies, everything will be covered. It doesn't work that way. The insurance companies will look at the previous policy and then determine what beyond that they will pay. So now when you go into 4 policies, the bottom line is whatever your co-pays would be, all of that would price out anything you're going to have as an advantage for having that many policies. You end up paying more because you have these numerous policies. The best that you can do is you can certainly accept that you have 2 policies and deal with it, but understand it isn't what you think it might be. And secondly, work to make sure that the policy that you have makes clear sense to you. Don't simply accept everything without reading it and understanding what it means. We will certainly work with you and help you to understand as best we can, but the bottom line is insurance companies are more likely to respond to the customer than the dental clinic who is applying for them to release funds. They're more inclined to do that for their customer than they would for us. And I've said this on other podcasts, but it's worth repeating. If they make a change in their overall process of how they pay out for particular codes, and they make that change for a dental office, they're more likely to have to make that change for all dental offices. Whereas if a customer is complaining or wanting something, they might be able to provide that to a customer without them being obligated to do it for any other customer who's not asking for it or any other dental office. So keep that in mind. The squeaky wheel often gets the grease. Now, that's the first part of this podcast. The rest of this is I put out a Substack Still Point podcast. It's called the Still Point Project Podcast. And I put it out for April 16, 2020. And it is the Saturday before Easter. And so I'm going to place that on here for you to listen if you wish to. And that's it for today. Thanks for listening. We all need a conversation. And so this is my contribution to that conversation. Today in our world, I think there is a lot of uncertainty and fear. And some of it I think is actually stoked by people who we do not know. And some of the aspects of our lives over the last number of years have actually, I think, whether intentional or not, I think there's some intention behind it. Don't know more than that to want to even speculate. But the net result is that there has been isolation and separation, and with that, distrust of one another, the people closest to us. And when we're in a nervous situation where we don't know the future and it becomes more and more uncertain, and people are wearing masks even now when masks have no medical significance anymore. They don't stop the spread of anything except particles of spit, and it's nothing to do with virus protection. And when I see people who are wearing masks today, I totally understand that they are getting their information and they're trusting. Essentially, we're all trusting something, someone, and we have different sources that we trust. And consequently, some of us have removed the masks. In fact, I would say today most have removed masks and some have not yet. And it all has to do with who we're trusting for the information as to what will keep us safe. I am of the opinion that there is no safety, but there is security in our relationships with one another, that we are better off together than we are separated and fighting one another, and especially fighting ghosts and things that are in our imagination, more than dealing with reality and trying to understand what it is I can do today to have a good life and to be better than I was yesterday. And I basically am interested in, my focus in writing the Still Point Project is what I describe as the intersection between the faith community and the recovery community. And these are two groups I care deeply about because I'm in both, and I believe in both of their causes. But the interesting thing about this particular intersection, it's kind of like being in a family where two family members don't get along, and you're the third one looking at this, and you care about both of them, and you wish they would get along better, but you can see the problem and the misunderstandings. It's like standing back from an argument you're watching and seeing that both sides have reasonable ideas, and both sides are having blind spots. And consequently, you as a third party can look at this and say, well, I wish they would get along better, but there's nothing really you can do to change them. They're going to have to do it themselves. And that is kind of what it's like to be inside the faith community and also inside the recovery community. So, first of all, let me describe for each side, because my hope is that I get a strong readership from both sides. I don't want to explain one side to 99% of the others who everybody knows all of this. I want to be in that place where I can kind of help both sides kind of understand each other a little better, and to show, frankly, that they are on parallel paths going in the same direction. It's just that they see things differently. They have different perspectives. And when you're in recovery, you are there because you have been broken. There's been something that's harmed you, or you have harmed yourself, and you recognize that there's something wrong, and you don't know exactly what it is, perhaps, maybe you do, but you know that it's not right. There's something not right in me. That does not mean you're not of the faith community. It doesn't mean you don't know God. It doesn't mean any of that. It's simply that the position that you take in order to be in the recovery community, the common denominator for everyone there is they've all been broken. They've all experienced the bottom. And I wrote one on hitting the bottom. Go back and find it. But essentially, you hit the bottom. And when you hit bottom, all of the pretense and all of the bravado goes away. The air is knocked out of your lungs. And maybe for the first time, you're quiet. You've given up trying to argue, trying to justify, trying to do anything. There's nothing left. That's the bottom. And the miracle of the bottom is that your ears are opened and you can listen and you begin to receive. You begin to receive from outside yourself comfort, strength, support, and a discovery that there are other people around you who care about you. And because of all of that, it strengthens you. It encourages you to get up and take one step at a time. And that's why I think it's so important that in the recovery community we have the steps. The steps are 1 to 12. And in many ways, those steps go out one step at a time, beginning on step number 1. You go to step number 1, then step number 2. You don't jump in at step 10. And where we learn this is we go to meetings. So there's a commonality with our faith groups, our church groups, and recovery groups is we meet together. Again, the recovery people are in recovery. And so much is laughed about in society and in entertainment about people sitting perhaps in a circle talking, and every one of them is obviously humorously funny in their bizarre behaviors. And that's how it's looked at from the outside. But from the inside, it actually is one of the most amazing things anyone can participate in, because the process of the recovery group is not that we fix one another, but that we join together in the agreement that we need help ourselves. But we begin to talk and express ourselves, not to complain and not to justify, but to express gratitude, to express hope, to express the things that are in us that we find have helped. And by expressing all of this to the group, others can listen to us and receive from us. And also they're going to do the same thing. There is no direct speaking one to the other. It's speaking to the group as a group. And most of the time, and one of the things that's common in this sort of an activity, meeting, is that you essentially speak once, but you have all the time you need, generally, unless someone is finding that you're just wanting to talk for talking's sake. I have never personally been in a meeting where it's been someone has been cut off. I know that can happen, but it's a rarity, as long as everybody who is there has agreed to the premise of why they're meeting together, which is read out at the very beginning of the meeting. In other words, the rules for the meeting come at the beginning and are read out. And so every meeting, it may seem to newcomers that it's fairly repetitious. They seem to be reading the same thing. But eventually you begin to become aware of the fact that what is being read is the agreement for the meeting, and that you, by sitting there following the reading and participating in the meeting that occurs after the readings, that you're in agreement that you will abide by the rules you just listened to. So that's how it's governed. It's governed by the meeting itself. So if you go to a different meeting and they read something differently, then listen to what's being read, and if you agree with it, you sit through the meeting. If you don't agree with it, stand up and walk out. That is how these things work. So, back to the idea that in a meeting you have essentially a time where you can express yourself if you want to, and there's no requirement. that anybody must speak. You can sit through a meeting and say nothing, and that is as acceptable as somebody who wishes to share. Once you've finished, then you'll find everyone will thank you for sharing, but that's all they're going to say directly to you according to those rules, unless somebody's not following them and not understanding, in which case there can be some guidance by those who really are aware of what's going on and what the need is that we're not cross talking to other people. We're talking to the group as a whole, sharing what our heart is, and we are expressing gratitude, and we are expressing things that are bothering us or worrying us. We can share all of that, but it's within the context of the need. Everyone else is listening, and then once you're finished, you go back into listening. And I will tell you that there is so much richness in what I hear coming out of the mouths of everyone in the room, regardless of how long they've been there, that it becomes a church. It becomes a place where healing occurs, because there's a level of honesty that is profound. Now, if we go over to the faith community, the first 3 steps of recovery have to do with finding God. So in the faith community, this is a group who is searching for God or who has found God, but the common denominator there is God, not recovery. And it may be a subtle difference, but essentially what happens in like a Sunday school class or any sort of group thing is that it may not go to the honesty level of the recovery group. And for that reason, some of the conversations in that area are not deep toward recovery, and maybe that's not even the intent, because I think that where the recovery group can benefit from the faith group is the faith group is searching and seeking information and learning and growing deeper based upon the heritage that we all have from the generations that have gone before us. And there actually is in the recovery group, the steps are actually written as if the people who have gone before us are telling us how it helped them, how it worked. It's all in the plural. We did this, we found this, we chose this. And the essence of the steps is, if you do what we did, we believe you'll have the same results. That's how they're written. You come over to the faith side, we're reading what we've learned, what people have learned in the past, and the scriptures and Bible, and all of that has profound and deep impact. And what both groups share is the fact that they are essentially not honored or appreciated to any significance by the general culture that we find ourselves in. Now, we say in the United States we're a Judeo-Christian nation. Yes, that's true, and our heritage comes from that. But our culture today is not that. We are a minority in that. And the sad thing with regards to how generations are growing up is there is a general ignorance on anything having to do with religion or the Bible, and even on the recovery side. The interesting thing on the recovery side is when you look at AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, prior to that, which was, I believe, was in the 30s when it was first formed. Somebody can correct me on that, but it's within the 20th century. But prior to AA, we had sanitariums for severe alcoholics, and there was no cure, and people were just they could dry them up, but if they let them out of the sanitariums, of the alcohol hospital, whatever you want to call it, they would just go back to drinking, and they would die. So it was a death sentence to be an alcoholic, but before AA it was a death sentence. And what happened was that one alcoholic discovered that if he tried to help another alcoholic and share, that they would both get better. And then they did it with a third person, and then it just began to grow. And it became one of what I consider the great medical miracles of the 20th century. One of the great achievements in terms of medicine is the fact that chronic alcoholism can be managed and that people can have go achieve sobriety and live fantastic lives and make incredible contributions. And these were people who were the initial group of alcoholics. They were in the gutter. And then as the organization grew, it became such that it became acceptable for people who were even holding jobs and behaving normally in society, but knew they had a problem and they were addicted. And it became a source of recovery for them so that they didn't have to go to the gutter with alcohol becoming everything for them. They could find an escape route before they hit that. And then it branched into Overeaters Anonymous and people in drug rehab and other things. And so the principles that were discovered in AA were found that they could work actually in other groups. And the group that I'm involved with is Al-Anon, which is just another way of saying Alcoholics Anonymous for non-alcoholics. It is really the family group of the AA. It's how do you relate to somebody who has problems as severe as alcoholism? How does that affect your relationship with people who are more consumed with drinking than they are in maintaining a relationship? And it's the discovery that these people are having a disease and how to manage that. And more importantly, is that we discover that we have our own problems that we need to work on. And codependency is the idea that this other person's problem is my mission. And whenever that happens, when they get better, then my mission goes away. Maybe I feel less significant because I've been tied to somebody else's recovery or problems or whatever, and yet I have my own. And so I need to learn how to manage myself and allow anyone else, including alcoholics, to manage their lives and do it in a way of love. And that's really, if you look at what I've been writing lately, it's been on the topic of love. That it's a misunderstood word in our society, and I think it's been co-opted into something that is cheap and has no weight to it. When if you really study the idea of what love is and where it actually comes from, it is profound, and it is the thing that allows people to recover and heal and grow without having the false connections to people, and it lowers all the arguments down. It improves relationships, and that's basically Al-Anon is about improving relationships and not connecting with toxic relationships, learning how to manage ourselves as independent entities, and how that has to be structured with our relationship with our higher power, God, and also with our fellow human beings. That's a different way of living than what we came in with. Everybody who comes into Al-Anon wants to fix the person that's driving them nuts. That is the alcoholic. And quickly they discover that we're really not there for the alcoholic. We're there for one another, to support one another so that we can have quality lives regardless whether or not the alcoholic continues to drink. That we have the ability through our connections with God and with one another to have enough source of strength and hope to have a life that is worth living. So, finally, based upon the date, and the reason I decided I'm not going to do the readings this week, we are in the middle of Easter, and we are on the Saturday. And I think one of the interesting things about the Saturday between Good Friday and Resurrection Sunday is that Saturday is a quiet point. It is like a still point. The disciples who had heard, one of them saw, and all of them heard that Jesus was crucified and died and was entombed. And they were more or less in hiding. They kind of knew that if their leader could be arrested so rapidly and executed, they could do it for them, do it to them as well. It reinforced the idea that the Romans were in charge, and through collusion with the leadership of the nation of Israel at the time, anything could happen to anybody who wanted to break ranks, and essentially they were quashing rebellions. So the disciples, if you think about what were they going through, well, they were all hiding out, and I think the great courage was in the women who went to the tomb. They were the ones who had the courage to go, and they saw where he was buried, and they went back on Sunday because Saturday was the Sabbath, so no work was allowed. You couldn't do anything to a dead body. That was in the Old Testament anyway. You weren't to touch a dead body. So they came back on Sunday at dawn with the materials in order to clean him up, wrap him up, and prepare him for burial. So he was in a temporary tomb. They were the ones that had the great courage to go. The disciples did not go. So what was going through their mind? What was happening in them? And that's just a point of speculation. And I would say, here we are, if you're listening to this on the same day that's Saturday, what goes through your mind when it's between some calamity in your own life, say, and the recovery of that? Where are you in this? What do you need to do in order to recover and to gain the strength to trust that it will work out? You will get better. Things will happen on your benefit, and that all of it is, perhaps without your knowing it, behind the scenes, God is working toward your resurrection, working toward your final recovery, toward your ultimate happiness and your peace and your joy. So you might be sitting and thinking about your life and what's going on. I think we spend a lot of time trying to encourage people to think about God in different ways that will allow them to even consider the possibility that he's a friend, that he does not mean us harm, but that we are in a world of harm. We are in a world of danger. And God, in his love, in his quiet love, is encouraging us to connect with him so that he can pour into us the love he has both for us and the love he has for the world around us that he could use us to reach. So we reach one another and we care for one another. And in that process, we recover and we grow and we become people of faith, sitting in the Saturday between the horrors of our past and the potentials of the future. And we are people of faith, and we look forward to the coming of Jesus a second time. So death is not the end. That's the point of Easter. Death is not the end. We have a future beyond it. If we trust in God, we go with him. If we don't, we go a different direction, but it's our choice. And it's something that we need to decide, and there's no better time to decide it than on the Saturday before, during the Sabbath, during that time of rest, a time of reflection, to think about all the things that have gone on in our lives that we can be grateful for. To begin with, life itself. We didn't create ourselves. We are in this because we were chosen for it. And your life is precious. Wherever you are, whatever you do, your life is precious. How do I know? Well, Easter. Jesus died not for himself, but for the rest of us who needed it. And that's how we come to know God. And if that's confusing, then I would say the best place to learn about it would be in community. Go find a faith community. If you're in a recovery group, go find a faith community. If you're in a faith community and you're having problems and struggles with others or dealing with addictions that you aren't willing to share out in church because of the possible harm it could do, not only for you but for others, then you need to find a recovery group that has a word anonymous in it where you can go and you can share and you know that this group will keep confidence. And in that, you can recover. So, there it is. Have a great Easter. My blessings to you. You pray for me, I pray for you. Thanks. Talk soon. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening. This is the Perio Patient Podcast, and my name is still Dr. Ben Young. Thank you for listening, and have a great day. Bye for now. Hear about the new restaurant called Karma? There's no menu. You get what you deserve.